Hello and welcome to the Friday Five. This is a broadcast that I share that includes one Montessori toy versus a conventional toy, so we can start to learn more about the difference and understand the development behind Montessori activities. I talk about a practical life activity for children 0 to 6. I talk about a children's book that I'd recommend. And I talk about a parenting question that I find on the internet this week. So let's get started with our Friday Five. We're going to do a Montessori toy versus a non Montessori toy. And today we have puzzles. So, we're going to talk about some of the difference between a Montessori puzzle versus a standard puzzle. And a lot of it has to do with the sequence of steps that are needed to complete the puzzle, as well as the knob that is either present on the puzzle or absent. So, a lot of times, what you find in conventional toys is you find more simplistic versions of things in relation to the child's motor capacity. So, a block puzzle, like it's pictured on the right, that is very a simple puzzle. And it is simple for the child's hand to hold and do. But it's also complicated in the number of steps that it offers. So you would think that this would be a puzzle that a very young child could do, but then based on the number of steps, they're adding quite a bit of complexity. So I think the Montessori approach really does follow the child's motor development by creating activities that are actually motor skill wise for a younger child, but also making it simple enough for a younger child to be able to do it. And then when we get to more complicated puzzles with, say, 9 pieces, for example, then we also are going to up the ante of the motor skills required. So, um, that's one of the reasons why in Montessori puzzles you'll find either one puzzle shape on a puzzle plate. So it'll be one square on a single square plate, or you'll see just three. The square, circle, triangle, those are three distinct images. It's going to be more easily discernible between what is the shape that goes into which hole. Whereas the one on the right, they're obviously adding in some complexity of, for example, the square versus the rectangle. There's a slight change in the length of two of the sides that is making that one different from the other. So if you tried to put this in the hands of a very young child, meaning a child before they're 1 years old, a 9 to 12 month old, they're probably going to really struggle with trying to figure out because it's so early. So one would think that the child who's going to be successful with a block puzzle like this would be a toddler, but the actual function of it, we can offer puzzles for children 9 to 12 month old. We do want to make sure that they're simple enough for them to be able to engage. And we do that by having a limited number of options, of either making the options really distinct from one another, like the circle, square, triangle, or having it really just actually just be one option. And the only thing that they're working on is how does the puzzle itself fit into the puzzle plate. The other thing that you'll see in Montessori puzzles is the presence of a knob. So as the child is younger, the knob is thicker, but then it's going to convert into a thinner knob because it's meant to support the child's refining of their hand motion. And I would say that block puzzles, by and large, are supporting a very young hand grip. So, where the complexity of a 9 piece puzzle, like that's pictured here on the right, seems to be something that's super appropriate for a toddler, the actual ask of the puzzle in terms of engagement is asking for very, very basic motor skills, and it's not helping them refine much in the way of their motor skills when they use the puzzle. So it's sort of a missed opportunity here. So, what do I mean? Well, let's take a look at the hand development timeline real quick. So, what we know about the hand development timeline is the first 3 months, the child has involuntary or reflexive grasping. So, if you put something in the palm of their hand, If you stroke their palm of their hand, they're going to clench down. That is an involuntary grasp. It's really just if I can initiate this reflex, it will reflex down. That's going to be different than the voluntary grasp that we see after 3 months. So after 3 months, we actually see the child's reflex fading a little bit, opening the hand more, and actually reaching out to grab something. So between 3 and 6 months, that reflex is fading, which allows something to be near the hand and the hand to not automatically close down, but actually for the child to reach out and start to grab something. So we see them start to grab, and they're going to initially grab with a whole hand. Then around 6 months, you see the child doing thumb oppositional activities with their hands. So they're not just using the whole hand to grasp something, they're actually using their thumb in opposition to these other fingers. And that's going to be a really different type of hand motion because what it's leading to is what we call the pincer grasp. So from 6 to 12 months, you basically see the child doing thumb opposition, and then they just start dropping fingers until they get to what's called a pincer grasp. This is what you might see them pick up, their little snacks or something like that. They're going to use a pincer grasp. Somewhere around a year, the pincer grasp is immature or inferior is what they call it. It's when the thumb and forefinger are flat against each other. A refined pincer grasp, where we're headed, is when the child can actually pick something up with just the tips of their finger. So you get a sense that the child is going from this, to dropping fingers, to this, to this. It's all in refining the hand because the hands are doing so much for us every single day. They really are the tools, our first tools that we have. And so it's really important to development that these hands are really well refined. So that's what we're doing. So we're getting to that refined pincer grasp from 12 to 18 months, and then it's about using the refined pincer grasp. And if we think about a pen or a writing implement or a paintbrush, that pincer grasp is what's going to be this essential element. It's the pen is just resting typically in the sort of swoop between the thumb and the forefinger. Then we have the pincer grasp that is actually holding the pen in place. So we have these two fingers that have to coordinate, and then it's usually resting on a third. So people call this a tripod, but it's based on the initial presentation of the pincer grasp, and then the third finger is sort of there just to hold the pen in place. So for the child, we know that the progression of their hand and their progression towards literacy would really benefit from really strong hands that are very refined. So if we go back to our puzzles and we think, well, we know this wooden shaped puzzle that has 9 pieces on is developmentally sort of geared towards that toddler. Well, they're going to use a whole hand grasp to pick up any one of these pieces. Perhaps if they flip the piece on its side, they're going to use thumb opposition, but that's about it in terms of the grasp that they're using. And they're just matching puzzle to plate. But they will have been working on and have moved on from the whole hand grasp and the thumb opposition from 6 months. So we're sort of gearing this puzzle towards the hand of a child who's much, much younger than we have. So in Montessori, we always add puzzle knobs to our puzzles so that when the child engages with it, the child is not just engaging with the actual piece, they're engaging with what essentially will be a tripod grasp, because that's sort of the knob is too small for me to try to pick it up with my whole hand. And so it's just adding an element that is really helping refine the hand. And as I said, as the child gets a little bit older, that knob gets a lot smaller so that it really is just these 3 fingers so that will pick up this knob. So again, I would share this as a missed opportunity, but I also think that we have to look at the sequence of steps to decide how old would the child be. So single puzzle plates are usually super appropriate and great for kids 9 to 12 months. That would be a single shape in a single puzzle plate. Then the 3-shape puzzle, that might be something that is really fun from 12 to 18 months. If the child has really started to get puzzles, the more they do it, the more understanding they have, the more complex you can make it. So you have a puzzler, if you have a child who loves puzzles, they might pick up on, how to match the shapes and love it. And so they want to get to the next piece as soon as possible. So we can always make things more complicated. If a child is well practiced, we can always slow things down. But in general, we're going to have those single puzzle plates at the beginning, and then we can move on to a 3-shaped plate. And then from there, that's where you can add more complexity. But I would always be thinking about that knob. That's going to be something that really distinguishes Montessori puzzles from other puzzles. And the last thing I'd say about puzzles is both of the puzzles represented have the shapes that will match a perfect shape on the board. That's going to be less complicated. That's going to be simpler than a puzzle that requires one shape to fit to another, where they're right next to each other, because that means that the child isn't matching the shape to the shape on the plate, is that they're trying to figure out where it goes. So that's going to be another level of puzzling that is more complicated. So if you have a child who's really into puzzles, maybe you can introduce something like that where the actual puzzle pieces touch. So the image on the plate, or the thing that we see on the plate, is not going to match the shape that they're looking at. But that's definitely getting towards, a 2-year-old. And then certainly they can continue on that path to work on puzzles where the pieces go right next to each other as they're in preschool. All right, let's move forward. Practical life. So hand washing. It is such a basic thing, but it is so helpful for our own health and hygiene that we wash our hands. And I used to work at shelters for people who were experiencing homelessness. And one of the things that we talked about was hand washing as a health educator, and really like answering questions around hand washing as adults, because a lot of us might not be answering the questions, or at least washing our hands in the way that is actually effective. So it's really helpful to introduce this to children. And we want to make sure that it is age appropriate expectation. Usually children love water. So if we're like, hey, we're going to turn the faucet on, they're going to be pretty happy about it. But we also want to make sure that we're not expecting the entire full sequence of events to be what the child can handle. So there's a lot of steps to a hand washing process. There is going to the sink or the water source, right? There's going to be maybe getting up on a stool, maybe getting a stool to have out. There's going to be the use of the faucet. How does that turn on? Is it a push thing with your foot? Do you turn a knob? Which knob do you turn? Do you lift a lever? There's a lot of things that the child will have to learn about your specific sort of hand washing system. And they need like little lessons along the way. So if they need to go get a stool, then it would make sense that we know where the stool is. We say, oh, you can practice getting the stool outside of hand washing. Just practice getting the stool. And then also that they know how to engage with the faucet. They know how to turn it on and they know how to turn it off. Those are going to be really helpful for them to know. Then what is the soap going to look like? Is this going to be liquid soap where they have to learn how to pump and push down? For a lot of kids who are toddlers, who are the ones that are going to be starting to wash their hands, I know I've seen a ton of toddlers who've used a pump and they've pushed too far towards the nozzle. They've pushed down and the whole pump slipped out. And it's frustrating because the pump itself is not necessarily, it's stable, but if you push too hard on the nozzle, it can fall down. So we have to be thinking about how simple is this going to be if we use pump soap? Is there a way that, I can hold on to the soap, or they can bring it towards them so that they can pump more accurately? Or do we want to use bar soap? One is not better than the other. So we just have to sort of decide what we're wanting to do. If you take a standard bar soap, a sort of commonly found bar soap, that's going to be fairly large for the size of the toddler's hands. It's probably going to slip out a lot. So if you take a standard bar of soap and you cut it in half and you cut it in quarters, each of those quarters is likely to be a really great small bar soap for a child. And I would say that a bar soap can definitely be a bit more manageable than pumping, because they don't have to figure out what's going on with another piece of equipment. They really just have to pick up a bar of soap. The general sequence of steps to support the child after you've prepared the space. So you've gotten the stool that's necessary, you've picked the soap, that you want, the liquid or the bar of soap. There's some kind of hand towel that's accessible to the child that they're going to be able to dry their hands after they're done. So then we need to know the sequence. So the sequence is really helpful, especially if you're being water conscious, is that we don't just leave the tap on when we're washing our hands, that the water is only necessary to wet our hands, because if I pick up the soap and my hands are dry and the soap is dry, I'm not getting anywhere. So my hands need to be wet in order to kind of activate the soap. Well, then I need to lather. So does the water need to be on while I'm creating all this bubbles and activating the soap? No, it really, really doesn't. So there is a process. I would say the steps in this sequence, it would be showing them how to turn the water on, how to wet their hands, and turn the water off. That's sort of the first step, is turn the water on, get your hands wet, turn the water off. Then the next stage is to actually get the soap on. So pick up the soap or pump, whatever you're using, rub it around. If you're using a bar soap, you just need a little to activate, and then you put the soap down. Rub, rub, rub. Show them how to get in between their fingers. Show them how to wash each of their fingers. It should take about 20 seconds of washing to be able to do this. So you wash, 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 wash. So once everything's all lathered, then it's about turning the soap back on and rinsing. So the water's role is only to wet your hands and to rinse the soap off. It's not actually for the washing. The washing is with the soap. The washing is with the soap on wet hands. And so it's not actually related to the sink being on. This is the washing part. And we can do this for a long time, and we don't have to have the faucet on. And then when we turn the faucet on, then that's really just to rinse. And so sometimes, for example, if my kids, if they go to the bathroom, they turn on the water, they put their hands under, and then they dry their hands, I will tell them, you've just wet your hands. You didn't wash them. And they'll say, no, I did. I'm like, you wet your hands, didn't wash them, because there was no soap. But as soon as there's soap on their hands, then it's about rinsing it off with the water. And then the last piece is the towel. So if your child is going to have wet, dripping hands and the towel is halfway across the bathroom or wherever the sink is, they're going to drip as they go. So how does that feel to you? What do you do functionally? From your body stature, do you not have to drip all the way to the towel because you can just lean over here? Well, how could they have a towel that's just as accessible, where they can be able to dry their hand on the towel, put the towel back, and then be done? So hand washing is going to be a really important thing, a skill for the child to learn. And it's really helpful if we know the steps in the process so that we know what we're teaching the child. The other thing that I'll say is the child is learning so much more about what you're doing than they are from direct instruction. So if you're trying to teach the child by manipulating their hands and getting things sudsy, they're learning far less than if you were to wash your hands right next to the child. Because as you go like this, they're going to go like this. So it's really about them having access to actually being able to do this themselves and seeing you as a model of what this looks like. But if we haven't thought through all the steps, then halfway through, we're going to be like, oh, that's right. Now we have this. Oh, now there's drops on the floor. Okay, now we have to, and it's just going to be confusing for the child. So when you go to present something, when you go to walk the child through all the steps, and we actually want them to retain that information, it's important that the steps that they do are in their hands, in their body, And it's really important that we model instead of trying to do it for them. And we've thought about the steps that we're going to be asking them to do. So that would be hand washing. So there's some kind of how do I get to the water source, whether the water source is near me or I need to pull a stool. Then it's about wetting your hands and turning the faucet off after your hands are wet, activating, getting soap, activating it, lathering it. This is the longest part, getting all in between all the things. And you can get them to do it longer by talking about each of the fingers. Oh, did you do your ring finger? That's this one. I think I forgot mine. Here we go. Here's really rub, rub, rub. And then it's about rinsing all of that off and drying it. So that's hand washing. The next one is a book. This is my favorite book right now. As soon as it came out and I read it, I just thought this is an author who knows kids. This book is called Bodies Are Cool. It's by Tyler Feder, and it is such a great book that celebrates bodies in a way that is just it's very affirming. It's very age appropriate. It's really just such a lovely book about body affirmation, body positivity, just everything that is embracing that bodies are really cool and they do cool things. And I think kids at younger and younger ages are being taught or told or somehow picking up on the societal expectations around what bodies should look like or shouldn't look like. And this is such a great way to counter that. And so Bodies Are Cool is a really cool book and highly recommend. And the last one, our parenting question. So this is a parenting question that I found that somebody had asked. If babies build toddlers, that's my book, the book that I wrote. I'm looking for it. Here it is. Babies Build Toddlers. If this would be a good book to start for a 3-year-old, or is it only good for younger children? So what I would say to that, so Babies Build Toddlers is a comprehensive child development visual guide to child development and Montessori in the first 18 months. That's sort of the focus. But there's a lot of things in Babies Build Toddlers that are going to give you a really solid foundation in Montessori theory that are super applicable at any ages. The actual child development information is going to be helpful to understand for a 3-year-old how they've built language over the past 3 years, how they've built movement over the past 3 years, so that if you're encountering a difficulty with your child, it's going to help give you context to sort of say, oh, I understand you a little bit better because I have a much better idea of where developmentally you've been coming from. So I think you can definitely use the book to understand more about your child by understanding where they've been. But the actual practical suggestions, the material recommendations, those are going to be really centered on infants and toddlers. So the practical kind of recommendations are probably going to be out of scope for a 3-year-old. But for some really basic foundational Montessori theory, as well as really comprehending, if you're having a problem with meal times, it's really helpful to sort of say, okay, well, what was the history of their development toward meal times? And you can kind of cross-reference that with the experiences that your child has had. It's also a book that is meant to be very visual. So every page has visualizations in it. And these illustrations were done by 6 illustrators. And it can be a nice book that is nice to just sort of look at side by side with your child about some of the accomplishments they've had. So it's probably, some of the content is probably going to feel like these practical suggestions are not quite there. But if it feels appealing to you to have a book that can walk you through the development that your child has been going through, as well as to give you some basic, really easy to understand Montessori theory, then I think it can be a great addition to your bookshelf. And Yeah, that's what I would say to answer that question. So that's the end of our Friday Five. I do this every week as part of the Montessori Masterclass. I do hope that you join me in the Montessori Masterclass. You can check it out at thepeaceprogram.org/Montessori Masterclass to learn more about an incredibly comprehensive program that is offered by me and Montessori educators from around the globe, where we offer virtual support groups, one-on-ones, as well as self-study lessons to learn more about Montessori theory, practice, child development, and parenting. I hope you join me in there, thepeaceprogram.org/Montessori Masterclass. Thanks for watching.